The treaty flowers were dying. Tamaz noticed them the way he noticed most things aboard the Velhari diplomatic cruiser, sideways, while trying very hard not to stare at anything directly. They were called Sothran blooms, apparently, and they lined every corridor in long ceremonial chains, their petals the color of a bruise fading into gold. When he'd boarded 3 days ago, they had smelled like rain on hot stone. Now they smelled like nothing, and their edges had gone the translucent brown of old paper, and nobody was doing anything about it. He was doing something about it. He had asked the ship's water steward, a young Velhari named Osavith whose neck frills went flat whenever Tamaz spoke to him, where he might find a misting vessel. And after 17 minutes of frantic consultation with 2 other stewards and what appeared to be a small religious text, Osavith had produced something roughly analogous to a spray bottle, and Tamaz had spent the last hour moving quietly down the corridor, coaxing water into the roots of dying flowers. He was on his 3rd chain when he heard her. "You are performing funeral rites." He turned. Princess Saravel stood in the corridor doorway, and he did what he always did when he saw her, which was forget briefly how to arrange his face. She was tall in the way her species was tall, a long, articulated grace that made human proportions look approximate by comparison. Her skin shifted slowly between deep violet and a color that didn't have a human name, something between green and the feeling of cold water. She wore the formal chains of her rank and, inexplicably, an expression of genuine puzzlement. "They're not dead yet," he said, "just thirsty. The Sothran blooms are ceremonial. They are permitted to complete their natural decline. It is considered," she paused, searching, "a correct unfolding." "Right." He looked at the flowers, then at the spray bottle, then decided to keep going anyway. "I'll stop if you want me to." She did not say she wanted him to. She watched him miss the next chain in silence, her head tilting at an angle that, in the 3 months since the ceasefire, he had learned meant she was thinking hard about something she hadn't expected to think about. The fake marriage had been the diplomat's idea, specifically Ambassador Rhodes, who had been in the service for 40 years and approached the Velhari piece, talks the way a tired carpenter approaches a difficult joint. Find the shape that fits and worry about the aesthetics later. The Velhari did not sign treaties between strangers. They signed them between families. The nearest human equivalent they could locate was marriage, and the nearest humans available were Tamaz, who was an attaché and had the misfortune of being present, and Princess Saravel, who was 3rd in line and had the misfortune of her mother wanting this war over. It had been a ceremony of 40 minutes, conducted in a register language he didn't speak, and at the end of it they had pressed their palms together. Her hand was cooler than he expected, and had one more joint than his, and the shooting stopped. The arrangement was not supposed to require anything further from either of them. They were supposed to smile at a series of official functions, and otherwise maintain a respectful distance, while the actual diplomats sorted out the actual terms. Nobody had told Tamaz that the Velhari took the concept of household very seriously. "You keep attending to things," Saravel said now, settling herself against the corridor wall in a way that suggested she planned to stay. "The water filtration alarm on deck 4, the torn cargo netting in the secondary hold, now the flowers. I noticed they needed it." "You were not assigned to those tasks." "No." She was quiet for a moment. A length of Sothran blooms trembled in the recycled air, and he moved to the next one. "Among my people," she said finally, "a household member who attends to unassigned tasks is making a statement about the household." He glanced at her. "What kind of statement?" "That they consider it theirs, that they intend to remain." Her color had shifted toward that unnameable green. "It is not done lightly." Tamaz thought about Ambassador Rhodes and the 40-minute ceremony, and the way Saravel's hand had been cool and strange in his. He thought about the fact that he had, in fact, fixed the water filtration alarm, because the sound was keeping him up, and mended the cargo netting, because he'd watched a junior crew member struggle with it for 20 minutes while her supervisor ignored her, and watered the flowers because they were dying, and he was right there with a bottle. "I didn't know that," he said honestly. "No," she agreed. "You didn't." But she didn't sound annoyed. She sounded he was still learning her expressions, still calibrating the way her frills moved and her color shifted, something more like careful. The way a person sounds when they are revising something they thought they already understood. He finished the last chain and capped the spray bottle, and stood there in a corridor that smelled faintly now, like rain on stone again. "I'll keep it in mind," he said, "about the tasks. I did not say to stop." He looked at her. "I said it is a statement," she said. "I did not say it was an unwelcome one." Her frills, the ones along her jaw, shifted outward a full centimeter, maybe two. He had seen that before. It happened when she was trying not to look pleased. He decided not to say anything about it. He handed her the spray bottle instead, because her hands were closer to the next chain, and after a moment's consideration, she began to mist it herself. The dinner was not supposed to be a dinner. It was supposed to be a briefing, a summary from Admiral Yeneth about the border zone resettlement, attended by 3 other officers and a language specialist named Foss, who spent the entire meal frantically cross-referencing a translation tablet and sweating. Somewhere in the second hour, the briefing became a meal, the way things do on long journeys when someone is hungry and the food is there. Tamaz sat across from Saravel and tried to follow a conversation conducted mostly in Velhari, with occasional courteous pivots to the trade tongue they all shared. He managed about 60% of it. The other 40% he tracked by watching faces and frills, and the particular way Admiral Yeneth's secondary eyelids moved when she was skeptical. The food was, he was still calibrating this too. There was something that looked like a dumpling and tasted like an argument. There was a broth with a thing floating in it that turned out to be perfectly fine once he stopped looking at it. There was a flat bread that was extraordinary, warm and faintly sweet, and he ate 3 pieces of it, and the young officer next to him noticed and had more brought without being asked. "You enjoy the Tethran," Saravel said, during a gap in the Admiral's debrief. "Is that what it's called?" "Yes, very much." "It is a funeral bread." He stopped chewing. "For celebration also," she added, and her frills moved in the way he was now fairly certain indicated suppressed laughter. "The same bread. Context determines meaning." He thought about it, that's very efficient. Humans make different foods for different occasions. Different enough that a funeral bread would only be at a funeral, yes. She considered this with the particular focus she brought to things she found genuinely strange. So the food is an announcement. It tells you what kind of gathering this is before you have decided for yourself. "I suppose so." "And if someone brought funeral bread to a celebration?" "That would be very strange. People would be upset." She tore a piece of Tethran and ate it, watching him. "Here, you may decide for yourself what this gathering is." He looked around the table, Foss sweating over his tablet, the young officer who'd brought more bread now explaining something to the Admiral with expansive hand gestures, a second officer who had fallen asleep against the wall and been left to it. The border resettlement documents were spread across half the table. Someone had put a mug on top of the Starling maps. "I think I'd call it a working dinner," he said. "Something in the middle." "Yes," she said, "something in the middle." And she pulled a piece of the map out from under the mug and smoothed it flat and pointed to a zone near the outer disputed boundary. "Admiral Yeneth is concerned about this section. The resettlement will displace 3 agricultural communities. She believes your ambassador has not understood the scale." He leaned in to look. "Has she told Rhodes?" "She has told me, I am telling you." He met her eyes, her primary ones, deep amber steady. Because you fix things," she said simply. "And this needs fixing before it becomes the kind of problem that unfixes itself." He studied the map. He pulled out his own tablet and started making notes. Across the table, Foss had finally fallen asleep too, his cheek resting on the translation index, and the young officer draped a spare uniform jacket over his shoulders with the automatic care of someone who'd done it before. And the Admiral went on talking, her frills calm, her voice even, the stars outside the viewport very old and very far away. Tamaz sent a message to Ambassador Rhodes that night, 3 paragraphs specific, with the map coordinates attached. He wasn't sure it would land. Rhodes had a tendency to receive information and put it in a folder. He sent a copy to Rhodes's deputy as well, just to be safe, and went to bed feeling like a person who had mended cargo netting. Not heroic, just useful in a place that needed it. He found the note on the 4th morning. It was tucked beneath his door, a small card of the ceremonial paper the Velhari used for formal correspondence, dense with a script he couldn't read. He brought it to Foss, who had recovered from dinner and was in considerably better spirits, and Foss read it twice and then looked at Tamaz with an expression he couldn't interpret. "It's a household notation," Foss said carefully. "Velhari domestic register. This type," he tapped the upper border, "is used when a member of a household formally acknowledges another member." "Acknowledges how?" Foss read it again. "As necessary, it says essentially, you are someone this household requires. You have made yourself required." He looked up. "It's signed with her secondary name, the one used only within the household." Tamaz sat with that for a while. Outside the viewport, the border zone slid past, battered and beautiful, the stations and the fields and the places where the shooting had been. The ceasefire was holding. The resettlement talks had, in fact, shifted after his message. Rhodes's deputy had convened a new session, and the agricultural communities were still on the agenda. He went to find her. She was in the forward observation room, which was small and had a bench and a viewport that faced forward into the approach to the Velhari home system, and she was sitting very still in the way she sat when she was allowing herself to simply be somewhere. He knocked on the open door. She didn't startle. She never startled, but her frills rose slightly, and her color shifted into that unnameable green. "I read the note," he said. Foss translated it. "I expected he would." "I wanted to say," he stopped, started again. "I know this started as a political arrangement. I know neither of us chose it the way people usually choose things." "No," she agreed. "But he looked at the viewport at the stars coming slowly toward them. I fixed the water alarm because the sound bothered me, and the cargo netting because it bothered me to watch it bother someone else, and I watered the flowers because they were dying and I didn't want them to. I didn't know that was a statement, but I think," he looked back at her, "I think I'd have done it anyway." She was very still. "I think I'd do it again," he said, "not as a diplomat, as whatever I actually am in relation to you." The forward viewport was full of stars, and beyond them the edge of the Velhari home system, and the light there was different, older, more amber, filtered through centuries of a civilization's particular relationship with its sun. Saravel sat in it and let her color shift fully into that green that didn't have a human name, and her frills were out at their full extension, and she looked at him with her amber eyes steady and her hands resting open in her lap. "You are someone this household requires," she said. "I did not expect that." A pause. "I do not think I expected to require anyone." He came and sat on the other end of the bench, not crowding her, leaving space, the way you do when someone is unused to company, and you want them to know the door is there if they need it. The light from the Velhari sun fell across the scratched viewport and onto the bench between them. After a while, she moved 3 centimeters toward the middle. He did not say anything about it. He just let it be what it was, a small shift, on a bench, in a room full of old light, on a ship that was taking them both home to a place neither of them had expected to mean anything. The Tethran, he thought, was both things at once. The bread that meant ending and celebration, depending on what you needed it to mean. He decided to need the second one.